Hi, and welcome to Joining Us, celebrating 50 years of Bands of America. My name is Chuck Henson, and for 35 of those 50 years, I was the primary public address announcer for Bands of America's series of regional and the Grand National Marching Band Championships. Now, over the course of the next 25 episodes, I'm going to do my very best to bring you the people and stories that ultimately have created the excellence that is BOA.
I just was fascinated by this man's marketing ability and the idea that he was putting together a national organization.
Well, one was having hamburgers directly across the table from Dr. Ravelli. So I'm literally watching him eat a hamburger thinking, that's William D. Ravelli having a hamburger in front of me.
Back when Marching Bands of America began in 1975, I and my high school marching band were one of the first to participate.
10 years after the experience, I'm still hearing from kids who thought that was one of the coolest things they ever got to do.
I mean, when you went joining us, those kids went nuts right then. You could have read out of a phone book from that point on. You had them.
They're just going to blow the roof off the place. Like, I get chills thinking about it.
The rifles would spin rifles, then they would catch them and they would fall on the ground at the end of the tune.
Like a death drop.
Yeah.
What's in your blood? If you cut my arm, I'll bleed Bands of America, Music for All.
What Marching Bands of America started was innovative, so new, so exciting.
50 years, a half century? Are you kidding me?
Happy 50th anniversary to Bands of America.
So get your program, find a great seat here in our virtual stadium, and get ready to learn everything you ever wanted to know about Bands of America. Joining us from Bellbrook, Ohio. Here we are, Thursday again. That means it's time for another Joining Us. Hi, everybody. I'm Chuck Henson, and I'm here with someone that if you're in the music education activity, you certainly know who this is. But I will tell you this. I mentioned to this person right before we started recording this podcast that in the 9 or 10 or so that we've produced up to this point, that his name has been mentioned in every single one of them. I want you to welcome Bob Buckner. Hi, Bob.
Hi, how are you doing, Chuck?
You said the bathroom wall thing worked out for you, right?
It did.
for a good marching band, call Bob at.
That's it. Yeah. Just keep writing your name down.
Oh my gosh. Bob Buckner, there isn't a memory that I have of Music for All Bands of America that doesn't include you. And that seems to be the case with everyone. How early? You were there almost at the very beginning, weren't you?
Almost.
How did Larry McCormick find you?
Well, I have no idea. You'd have to ask Larry that one. But my first experience with them was in 1978. And he called me to judge a show in Harrisonburg, Virginia at James Madison.
Would that have been like one of the first regionals then, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So early on, and I'd gone to a clinic that he did at East Tennessee State. No, I think maybe at University of Tennessee, because I'd learned about drum corps stuff, and I was just a little bit concerned that I didn't have enough expertise percussively to do anything that the percussion people were doing. So I ended up going to one of his clinics, and we talked briefly afterwards, but I'm not sure he even remembered that I was there. But at any rate, when he called me to judge that show, I was thrilled to do it, and I had a great experience. I met people that have changed my life, and most of them are still part of my life. Of course, I met Larry and got to hang out with him, Nick Valenziano. There was a guy named Gary Beckner, who was running, I guess, the contest portion at that point.
Correct, yeah.
Mike Davis, who's a lifelong friend now, and Michael Coomer, I roomed with.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, heck yeah.
And Michael came in after that. We became friends and worked with my drumline. I mean, he was a fabulous teacher.
So at that point, we're talking 1976.
78.
78, I'm sorry. Were you a high school band director then?
Yes, I was still at Silver Webster.
Okay.
That was the beginning of my last year there.
So what year did you bring Silver Webster to Summer Nationals?
1979. So it was that same school year.
Okay. You were asked to judge before you were even part of the organization.
Yes.
Wow. That brings up a lot of questions for me of how he would have known your credentials, how he would have found you through someone else, I'm assuming. He probably said, hey, we're having a regional here, and who can I get to judge? You had to have been recommended by someone, I'm assuming.
I would think so, but I really don't know who. The people I knew, I met Chops on that trip, by the way.
Oh, really?
Gary Chapinski,
yeah.
And we don't have him around any longer to contribute to this great activity. But he was there. Glenn Richter, who was at that time the director of the marching band at the University of Texas, was there.
Okay.
Ray Baumgart was there. Now, I had bought some arrangements from Ray, so he may have been the one that said something to Larry. I really don't know. But at any rate, it turned out to be a great adventure for me. Kind of a harrowing plane flight to get out of there, as I recall. But other than that,
I can recall a few of those myself, like doing the show in Morgantown, West Virginia, and not being able to get out because of fog and things along those lines. Crazy. So was Silver Webster your first teaching job?
Yeah. Interesting story how I got into teaching.
Okay.
In 1966, I was a senior at Western Carolina University. I was in my senior year, 66, 67. And I was working in a local plant. I was making radiator hose and V-belts and foam cushions, and it was hard work, really hard work. And so I'm doing all this, and I get a call from my college band director, Aaron Hyatt, and Aaron said, I think I've got a job you might be interested in. And I said, I'm thinking, geez, if I can, teach somebody's camp and get out of this plant for a week, I'll be happy. As it turned out, he had a full-time job for me.
Wow.
And he introduced me to a man named Carr Hooper, C-A-R-R. And Carr Hooper and his wife had spent the Second World War in the Japanese prison camp in the Philippines. And he was my first principal. And I don't know who were more frightened of the principal, the kids or the band director, but all of us. He really ran a tight ship. And really one of the best educators I think I've ever been around in my life. Really understood at-need children, knew how to serve his clientele well. And he saw something in me, so I ended up taking that job. And now I'm still going to school, and we're on the quarter system, so I'm taking like 15, 16 hours of classes.
So you don't have your teaching certificate yet?
Oh, no. Oh, no, that's beside the point. He just wanted somebody, they wanted a warm body. So I get to Silver Webster. The first thing I did the first day was I ended up opening up a brand new set of uniforms. The JCs had bought uniforms. And that's the way small towns are. They think, okay, if we want to have a band, we need uniforms. They don't think about...
Yeah, if we have to play the instruments. No, you just need uniforms to be in a band. Yeah.
Yeah, we might need a bass drum, but, they don't think about things like that. But they were so fantastic to me. And 13 years later, I was still there.
But Bob, you couldn't have been much older than the kids.
Oh, well, that was a problem. One of the things that Aaron told me was, the only two things, he said, I've never known anyone that got fired for having a bad band. He said, the only two things that'll get you fired are messing around with your kids and stealing money.
Amen. Yeah.
So I made it a point not to do that. And so fortunately got through that year really well. I was going to stay 1 year, get things organized and leave. And it was magic.
Yeah.
I had 12 kids the first day I walked in.
The whole band, 12 kids.
Yeah. By the end of the fall, I had 48. I just basically called every kid that had ever had a band class.
Yeah.
And that was when you did it all by landline and just finding the phone numbers. And a lot of them were party lines, so you'd call and talk to 3 or 4 people. Was your kid in band?
Oh my God. I had one of those when I was growing up. That's hilarious.
Then you understand.
No one even understands what that concept is right now.
Oh, I know. It's too bad. But at any rate, I ended up staying 13 years, started having some real success immediately in terms, not competitively, but just I realized that I knew how to teach kids how to play. I understood that I knew how to get them to make a good characteristic sound. And I think that's the key to being a band director anyway, is you don't have to know how to play everything really, really well, but you have to know how to teach them to make good characteristic sound.
It's always the person standing in front of them. It's the person standing in front of the kids that makes the difference.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think there's any question about that. And maybe, I think in every subject, but particularly music, because they look to you, because a lot of times they know nothing. And particularly beginning kids, they don't know anything. So you're really their example. So you have to have something going for you there.
Bob, just this past week, I noticed the Bands of America has been putting out that 50 for 50 series of little snippets of the groups that have been to Grand Nationals. And I saw the clip from Silver Webster. How many kids were in that band?
That was one of our larger bands.
I would say, because it was big.
I think 128 kids in that show. The largest the marching band ever got was 144. But
the Golden Eagle Band Show will include the following musical selections: Russian Easter music, calypso, Mean Old Lion, Ease on Down the Road, percussion solo, medley of the Wiz production, and Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Golden Eagle
So you went from 12 kids to 144 kids in basically a decade.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Probably before that.
Wow.
The big problem was that our kids didn't understand that they didn't have any advantages. So they just sort of thought, well, if we work hard, the rest of it will take care of itself. And it did. I mean, they were amazing students. Some of them, to this day, we still are friends.
Really?
I think we have 8 of them that are playing in the community band that we do now that still functions in Silva. And one of the young men in there went to Eastman, then did an advanced degree at Michigan. There's some really, really wonderful musicians that came through there.
Clearly, you inspired all of that. You gave them a love of music. You gave them the tools they needed, to want to do that. That's awesome. I think it's great.
Well, I appreciate that. What people don't realize about that Silva band, though, that I always thought was so impressive was that there were 30 kids who were 8th grade or younger that were in that band.
Wow.
The entire cymbal section were 6th graders.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Oh, no. I mean, if you go back and watch the video, I think they actually crashed the cymbals once during the show.
Just the rest of them just holding them?
I remember Mike Coomer saying, how old are those kids? I'm like, 12, I don't know. But they were good, smart kids. And I told them, I said, as long as you don't run into each other, you're going to be fine. And they did a great job.
Was that the thing to do in Silva? Did band become the thing?
One of the things.
Yeah.
Now, during that same time, we won 6 state championships in football.
Wow.
And 2 in baseball. I mean, it was a very active sports community, and it was a great time for that little town at that point. And, it was 7 miles from the university. So one of the things that I had as an advantage is if I didn't know how to do something, I just drove back to Cullowhee to my teachers and said, I don't know how to do this. You need to teach me. Oh, by the way, I found that picture, that note the other day.
I was just going to say, just to hear you say the word Cullowhee, it makes me so happy. Okay, please tell the story, and then we'll go on to another topic.
Well, Cullowhee. So at any rate, what I would do is if I didn't know how to do something, I would just go ask my teachers. So all those things that I missed in class, and I'm sure there were a lot of them, all of a sudden became very real to me and very useful. The good thing was when I went to school, I went on a scholarship, and my scholarship was $150 a year. And for that, I got to be the librarian and the uniform manager and the equipment manager. So one of the things I learned how to do was organize. I never have liked it, and Donna would tell you right now that I'm not very good at it, but actually the things that I have to organize, I'm actually very good at. So what ended up happening for me was that I was able to use those organizational skills, and I had to because I was going to school all the time.
Yeah.
And I had to run this band program, and nobody knew any more than I did. So fortunately, when those uniforms came in the first day, I knew how to organize it. I knew how to fit the kids. I just knew how to do that stuff.
Yeah.
And so that built into the leadership program for the band, which really made that band take off because I just taught kids how to teach each other. And so all the marching stuff, all the drill cleaning and that, those were students that did a lot of that. They knew what they were doing. Now, I'd had 3 assistants during that time. Pat Buckner, who was my ex, and she was a wonderful musician and teacher. And she helped me, but she did not do anything with the marching band. We had a young family, and there was just no way to make that happen. And then a fellow named Mike Trull came in, and Mike was there 7 years. His brother, Steve Trull, that you might know through DeMolin Uniforms.
Oh, okay.
He was their national sales rep, manager. So Steve was with me for a year. And then a fellow that was there my last year, a guy named Tom Stites, who became quite a good band director and a supervisor of music. But in order for us to function, we had to organize ourselves. So the students took on a lot of responsibility, and they could fit and handle uniforms. Some of them could even alter uniforms, which was pretty amazing.
You had a little sewing club going there.
Yeah, well, a lot of times you didn't want to do that if you didn't have to, but
yeah,
they were good at it, and they didn't mind doing it. as soon as that year was over, 79, when we got to Whitewater, I had already decided that I was going to leave at the end of that year. There were a number of reasons for it. The basic one was funding. We changed superintendents, and our budget went from next to the last year I was there, we had $18,000 a year budget from our county. Well, that meant we could buy instruments.
Yeah.
That really helped us. And there was a wealth of background instruments and things like, we had bassoons, we had French horns, we had all the things we needed for our program. But what we didn't have was sustained support other than our booster club. So when I realized that it was going to come down to the boosters having to do everything, I realized that we were going to be in trouble. So I had decided that that was going to be my last year. And I'd already started writing shows and teaching camps, and I was making more in the summer than I made during the year.
Well, so let me ask you about that, because that's kind of where your forte came in as a designer of writing other people's programs. At what point did you just gain that skill on your own band as those 12 kids grew into 150 or so?
I guess.
When you got to the band, were they doing what was then called the core style, or were they a
no.
Big Ten band, or were they in anything?
We were doing Cassavant, and it's interesting because Greg Bim and I've had this conversation several times. We went from Cassavant to the Moffitt Patterns of Motion, and both he and I kind of adapted our charting style to Patterns of Motion, which is really done in groups of 4. But when I got there, they were doing all the Cassavant precision drill stuff.
That's funny. My high school had our drum majors for Cassavant style, but the band was doing core style by then.
Yes. Kind of weird. Actually, if you remember, the last band that I saw do that style was Norwin.
That's right.
If you remember, the LJ's drum majors had that very elaborate, I couldn't follow them, but that band could.
Yeah,
I'll tell you
that's
that.
all that's important, right? Did anyone teach you how to write drill, or you just took these styles and began to adapt them?
There was an assistant band director when I was growing up. He was the junior high band director. I was interested in it, and I asked him one day, I said, how do you do this? How do you figure it out? And he takes me in the practice room, and there's a board in there, and it's got a football field drawn on it, and it had little wooden dowels, and they were numbered. And he showed me how they did the Cassavant stuff. And of course, a lot of that was line drill, and you moved people out to the 20, and every other person stopped, and that kind of stuff. So, and then you did a lot of diagonals. So I started doing it like that. And then I went through the Patterns of Motion, and then my senior year, my college band director ended up being a guy named Bill Curtin. And Bill Curtin was very instrumental, even though I only had him for a year. He's the guy that told me about drum and bugle corps.
Oh, really?
And he told me where I could find, he had taken private lessons from Frank Arsenault, the rudimental champion.
Sure. Yeah.
And so the first time I decided to go to a drum corps show, my assistant and I and our wives drove to Manning Bowl in Revere, Massachusetts. Revere.
Revere.
And watched a drum corps show. And we walked in, and there must have been 80 corps in the show, little corps.
There were so many in that part of the country.
Oh,
every
yeah.
tiny little town had a corps, yeah.
And so we saw, I wanted to see the Troopers because that's the only corps I knew existed. So we watched the Troopers. We watched everybody. 27 Lancers won the show, by the way.
Yeah.
And had 11 company fronts during their show. I know that because I studied that film so many times. But I had filmed all this on 8mm camera. And so we filmed all day prelims. I did. And then when we got back home, we just literally burned that film up. I mean, we just started watching that stuff. And nobody knew how to chart that. And so I started reaching out to people and sort of figured it out. But I started charting it the way that I knew how to chart.
How was that? Can you describe that process a little bit? Or
Well, I remember that I think one of the first entrances we did a diagonal entrance from the back left-hand corner of the end zone. And I just took my ruler and spaced my people off at a 2-step interval and said, okay, we're coming across the field this way, and it's going to take us 32 counts, and we're going to stop here. And I learned to use a divider so that I don't know if you know the drafting tool, but it's the little thing that has 2 pins in it. Looks like a compass.
Yes.
And I learned that I could walk that around curved forms and put people at a pretty accurate interval. So that's where I started putting all that together.
This may seem like a dumb question, but was there such a thing as a 22.5-inch step then? Had that been established or?
Oh, yeah. That was
Okay.
the basis of Cassavant.
Okay.
I mean, if you had the 22.5-inch step, that was gold. And if you go back and watch the bands, and there's a lot of stuff on YouTube, Cassavant's high school band is on YouTube.
Really?
Chattanooga.
I will look it up.
Now, I remember seeing it, thinking it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. Now, when I look at it, I go, that's kind of dirty. But you have to remember that what they did was they would maybe prepare 2 weeks for a contest.
Yeah.
2 weeks,
But how many contests were there? One?
Well, yeah, Bristol, that was kind of it. So to go back to how I started writing was we took the band down to Cary, North Carolina. The oldest contest in North Carolina is the Cary Band Day. Been going on forever, still going on. Great show. Always had a lot of bands in it, 70, 80 bands. So we go down there and we're fortunate enough to win the show. Now, this was fall of 1972.
Okay.
We finished the show, win the show. I'm getting ready to leave the stadium, and this band director comes up to me. His name was Ed Taylor. Ed Taylor was the band director at Clinton, North Carolina. And Ed said, I don't know you, but I loved what you did with your band. I would like for you to write a show for me.
Wow.
Would you like to do it? And I'm going, well, sure. I'd never written a show for anybody. The first thing I'm thinking is, how do I get this so he can understand it?
Right. You've got your own way of doing this. It's not really something that's translatable just yet, is it?
No, that's what made it translatable. I had to develop a system of charting so that I could drop it in the mail. Now, the good thing is I took what I had done. I did a couple of tunes that I had done before, so I really knew the music really well when we did it. But I wrote for Ed for 31 years.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, this is the real kicker. I saw Ed right before he died. He died at 92. And Ed still remembered all those kids' names. And I mean, he was like,
wow,
Mr. Music in Clinton, North Carolina, forever and ever.
You did his drill for 31 years. Did you charge him what you charged him the first year every year for 31 years?
Just about, yeah. Actually, what we would do is we would do a camp, and we would take in, you remember Julie Gilbert, Barbara Newberry that used to work for me in the summers?
Yeah, sure.
And different percussionists. Mike Coomer worked his camp sometimes, but we had people that would go in, and we would do a weekend camp with them. Oh, it was Memorial Day. So we do a long weekend and teach their entire show, and then I would go back in the fall and fix the things that they had forgotten.
So was that the first show you wrote other than your own, was for that one?
Yes.
And at that point, does word kind of filter out, hey, there's a guy that writes drills, there's a guy that writes drills?
Well, when the Clinton band started winning, it did, because they were very good. They could play. And that was the key. If you could find a band that could play, it was good advertisement, because you didn't have the internet. There was no way for people to know. Everything was word of mouth.
Well, and you already said you went to Massachusetts, videotaped everyone, and then came back to study them. There wasn't even a method of distribution. You had to be at a show. You had to be there in order to see it, right? There was no YouTube. There was no videotape. There was no VCR, DVD, all that stuff.
Right. None of that. Actually, the first stuff I filmed, I literally put on 8mm film.
Do you still have those?
I do.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'm not sure what they're like right now. That stuff tends to disintegrate.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a fellow who's very interested in trying to help me restore that. So I think we're going to work on that next.
Very cool. When you took Syllable Webster to Summer Nationals in 79, how was that experience for you? You went as a band director, as a competitor. Tell me about that experience, just going and taking the band up to the show.
Well, it kind of goes back to having been at James Madison, because I made a number of friends that are lifelong friends through that trip. And one of them is a guy named Charlie Brody. And Charlie was the band director at Hanover High School. You may remember them. They were Class A national champions.
Yeah, I do.
I think the following year. Well, I judged his band at JMU. And when I left, I thought, that's as good a band as I've seen for a small band. I said, if we could compete with them, we wouldn't be embarrassed. I was always worried that, you'd go somewhere and just be so totally outclassed that you weren't in the contest. So at any rate, I decided that I would go. So we entered the contest. We put our show back together in the spring, and we changed a little bit of it in the middle. That's the first time I ever did anything like a theme show, where we did from the middle on out, Ease on Down the Road and Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and He's the Wizard was all from The Wiz or The Wizard of Oz.
Was there a tradition at your school of competing in the summer?
No.
So that's what I'm thinking, because I know that the Midwest had the summer thing going on, but
Yes.
how did you convince the kids to take part of their summer and invest it in this to go on a trip like that?
Well, the key word is it was a trip.
Yeah.
What ended up happening was that when you said, we're going out of town, you got to remember where Silva is. It's in the mountains of Western North Carolina.
Well, tell us where Silva is.
Well, if you fly to Asheville, you still got about an hour drive to get to Silva.
Yipes. Yeah.
Actually, maybe 45 minutes now. The roads are better than they were then. But
Yeah.
so we bussed all the way to Whitewater, and that was quite an undertaking. And I think just the adventure of it, we would try to do trips every now and then. We'd done the Festival of States in St. Petersburg, which was, before that was the national championship. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Yeah, my high school went to that as well. It was awesome.
Well, so you understand, that was a big show,
Yeah.
but the problem was they only brought one band from each state. But at any rate, because the kids were going on this adventure, they thought, sure, we'll do this. I mean, they worked hard. I mean, what we did, as soon as school was out, we took a week off, and we'd already put the show back together. And by the way, we did a spring contest that spring. We hosted one, and we had actually Falls Church, who went on to nationals, was in that show in 79. They were there. South Cobb, Freddie Martin's band was there.
Oh, wow.
This was a big contest. So we had that contest. And then, by the way, Freddie, who remains a dear friend, I talked to him this week, by the way, he's doing a lot better.
Nice.
But Freddie stayed over. Bruce Burritt, I had invited him down to judge the contest. He stayed over. And then we had Mike Coomer and then Julie and our staff, Barbara Newberry, they stayed around and helped. And we did a day out of school. The principal let us have a complete day with that group of people. And we just brainstormed about that show, all the little things we need to do. You would not believe how much we changed it and how much it improved it having those people around. So we got all that stuff done and then left for Whitewater. And when we went, I told them, I said, I think we can make finals. And honestly, I thought, if we could do that, that would make the trip worth it. And we get up there. We stay in the same dorm, by the way, with Hanover. So that's when Charlie and I really met. And his wife, Colleen, she was sitting on the windowsill while I was talking to our band before we were going on the field. Colleen said, Charlie, you need to talk to this guy. I said, he says the same things you do, just a lot slower. So we ended up becoming friends. And I actually wrote Charlie's shows for years after that until he retired. So when we get to the show, the big thing that was different for us up there, the wind.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. If you look at that film, I mean, the flags are standing straight out the entire show.
Well, there really isn't anything to break the wind, I guess, in Whitewater. I'm trying to remember, there are not a lot of hills in that part of Wisconsin. And you come from the mountains, which is going to break all the wind.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can see that.
It was really kind of tricky for the kids. And we used double flags. And, of course, dumb old me, the way we just came up with double flags was we put both of them on one pole. And then we had a thing like
a lever system. Yeah.
Yeah. We just pull it down
pulley.
And we had two at the end. So that was kind of the way we did it.
Yeah. So the one is actually two the whole show.
Yes.
And it's just twice as heavy.
Right.
And if you're trying to do anything, and then you pull it down like a flagpole, pull it down, and then there's one at the other end.
But those were strong little girls.
They had to. I'll tell you a funny sidebar story. When I was teaching at George Rogers Clark High School in Kentucky, we did this tune, and I got these 8-foot PVC pipes that we were going to use for the closer. And they had the flag portion of it was probably 5 feet of the 8 feet, just this enormous flag. And these tiny little girls were like, there's no way. I had them like drop them behind their head and stuff. And these little girls were like, there's no way we can do this. And I would get on my knees. So I was their height and I would go through the motion. I was like, yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Oh.
I could just hear the complaints about trying to get those things moving, those double flags moving. Oh my goodness.
Well, that's kind of my story of Whitewater. When we performed for prelims, it was a lot of fun. We had a really good performance. It might have been pretty close to the one, on the way up, we stopped, by the way, and did a show in Kokomo. We spent the night at Ben Davis High School.
Really?
And I knew the band director then was a guy named Ray Cox. And Ray, he retired, I think, maybe the year after that. So we go up to Kokomo and we won that show. And Ken Snook was standing on the steps right above me. I got as close to the press box as I could. And
Yeah.
I remember him saying to some of his friends around me, he said, "That's the best band in the Midwest this summer."
Really?
And I was like, "Really?" Yeah, I was thinking, well, I wonder if maybe we're better than I think we are.
Did you know Ken at the time, or you just heard him saying that?
I had met him I had judged at Dundee for the Dundee Scots for Doyle Heffron.
Sure.
So I had met he and Pam, and I knew how good their bands were. I mean, they were terrific.
At Lake Park, yeah.
Yeah. But at that time, he was in Bridgeport, Michigan. He was there before he went to Lake Park. But it was a fun night.
So did you share that with your kids? Hey, kids, guess what I just heard? Or you just,
No.
let them roll? Yeah. You don't want to give them too big of a head prior.
I didn't want to mess with them. The good thing about those kids is they love to perform. And I think that's a lesson I took with me when I went on to Western Carolina was that you really if you'll teach performance and not worry about competition, I think you do a lot better.
Bob, was there something different about the Bands of America experience for your kids over what they had done normally? Did something feel different in the air about the show?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, the thing that they don't do now that they did then was they had a leaderboard.
Right. I remember when I marched to drum corps, they would do a leaderboard, but they would put scores on it. They would even announce scores at that point. And they weren't doing that at Whitewater, right?
No, they didn't announce scores, but that was one of the things that Larry brought with him from drum corps. But that way you knew where you stood in terms of finals because everybody could count. As soon as a band was eliminated, they pulled your name off.
Wow.
So our band just
that seems very brutal.
I noticed by the end of the day, a lot of our kids were sitting around very close to that board watching it because I had told them, I said, if we do a really good job, we might make final. And as it turned out, we did.
Was your name on the top of that board at the end of prelims?
No.
Okay.
It was somewhere in the middle because there were no scores. Then they have the director's meeting. And that was the part that was hard for me because we went into the room, one of the locker rooms there at Whitewater, and they had us reach in, pull the number out. And I pulled out number 1. I don't know if you knew this, but that band went on first.
Wow.
So I pulled out 1, and all these band directors that had not spoken to me the whole time we're there start coming over and introducing themselves. It's like, "Hi, Bob. Sorry," kind of thing.
Sorry, you're new here and you have to go first. Yeah.
Well, the hard part was telling the band.
Yeah. That doesn't give you a lot of turnaround time between prelims and finals.
Oh, no. You just, you had time to eat and then come back. So I ended up taking one of my top drum majors. We had 2 drum majors. Believe it or not, one was a senior, one was a freshman, and the freshman had just been selected. And the reason was I didn't want to leave them with a rookie drum major the next year. So anyway, the senior and I, Jana Denton, were walking across the campus. And I said, "Jana, I have screwed this up for everybody." And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I just drew first." I said, "Nobody's going to go on first and win this contest." And she said, "That's the last thing you need to worry about. We'll take care of it." That's what she said.
Really? That's a good attitude.
It tells me that I must have told them something right to get there. So when I got over to the band, we started our warm up and I brought them in. I told them, we're going on first. I said, all I care about is I want you to do absolutely the best show you can do, and we'll let things fall where they may. And I said, just set the standard really high. I said, if somebody beats you, make them beat you. Don't beat yourself. So basically, that's exactly what they did. So they had a great performance. I thought that performance maybe was a little bit better than prelims. So I was very happy with it.
That's awesome.
And then, you go sit down, and of course, when they get ready to do the awards, they bring us back out, and we're on the far left end of the field in the end zone.
Because you went first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, my God. Your drum majors must have had to make that walk a million times then for awards.
Oh, my gosh. Well, that part, I can't remember too much about it. What I do remember is that, they give the caption awards.
Right.
And they would call out, best marching or best GE, whatever. And we won, I think, maybe general effect. But the thing that I remembered is the band kids, when they started calling out the names of the bands, we didn't get called out for a long time. And the kids are going, oh, they've forgotten us. And I'm like, no, I don't think they have. And sure enough, they finally call out our name, and it was a shock.
So that meant the captions must have been really close. Like you were second in one and second in another by just a little bit in order to still win the show.
Well, we won effect, and we were very close in marching. That band could march. And you had to be able to because everybody wore white shoes then. None of the hiding.
I love those shows. Those are some of my favorite finals shows. When the scores come up and we're ready to announce everything, I look at all that stuff and it makes me so happy when a different band wins each caption.
Yeah.
And then maybe even a fourth band wins the show. It's possible if you're second in every caption and other people are just floating around you that you could still win the show. And that kind of a surprise is always so great to me. Much like when we get to prelims, the end of prelims, and they send the list up of who makes finals.
Yeah.
I always take the group, if they're a first timer, if, I know their director really well and I know I can pull something out and I'll move them to the bottom of that list. And so the last name that's announced is that band. And I got to tell you, I've created more heart attack moments for more kids than you could possibly imagine. But, when they give me a hard time for that later, I say, you're welcome.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? And I go, because your kids will remember that moment forever.
Oh, yeah.
We almost didn't make it, and then we did. That feeling has just got to be priceless,
Yeah, they have a story at that point.
Yeah. So when you win the show, are you then, you go back home and that was your last year?
Yeah.
Right? Did your kids go, what do you mean? We just won Summer Nationals. You can't leave us now.
Well, the good thing was we were so tired by the time we got home. The goodbye was pretty quick. I pulled them in the band room, and I didn't even have a place to live. I'd already given up my apartment in Silva, and I didn't want to spend the night. My parents lived in Waynesville, but I didn't want to come in the middle of the night and wake them up. So I think they'd been on the trip too. So I spent the night in the band room. I slept on the hat boxes that night. And the next morning, I started a camp at 8:30. That was the beginning of United Music Enterprises. That was our first gig.
There is something very poetic in that, Bob. Sleeping in the band room on the last night with Silva. I don't know. There's something in me that just says that is perfect. Perfect. So with United Music Enterprises, you gathered your little team and then you basically took the show on the road, right? You started doing camps for other people.
Yeah, we started doing camps. We wrote shows, but we also would go in and teach them. I realized that I could probably do better if I could write more. But the problem in those days was everything was written by hand. So, it's just a little bit slower process. And, Donna and I married in 81, and that was a year later. We sort of came up with a system that I would try to stay home and write more, and she would staff the groups going on the road. A lot of times she would take a group and teach a camp or whatever, but sometimes I would go maybe do a design thing for the band directors or whatever. But I've done clinics. I think the only state I've never been in is South Dakota.
Well, we need to get you to South Dakota, clearly.
Well, I need to get up there.
How many do you think, if you had to guess, at the peak of the number of drills you were writing for one season, what would that number have been?
Oh, well, personally, I would hire a couple other writers. If I trusted them and I could teach them to write, like Andy, my son, wrote some for me, who's now a prosecutor. So, he went on to better things. He was a band director for a while. Bobby Lambert wrote some for me.
Right.
David Cook, a few folks like that if I felt really confident in the way they wrote. So we might have produced 80 or 90 shows in the summer.
In one season.
Yeah.
Well, it's no wonder that everybody has your name at the top of their list when they talk about their experience then. Were you essentially competing with summer camps that Bands of America was putting out at that point? At what point did you transition over and start teaching at the BOA Summer Symposium, or which is now called the Summer Camp?
I started doing that the very next summer. In 81, I went to Summer Symposium. As a matter of fact, Tim got me involved in that. And, we got involved in a lot of things at the same time. One was the weekend with the experts.
Right.
But I remember flying into Chicago and staying at Tim's condo. Gary Markham was there.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember who else. There were like 5 guys staying there that weekend.
At Tim's?
At Tim's. And we go over and meet with Larry, and he has this idea that we're going to do this thing called Weekend with the Experts.
And that was the first you'd heard of it?
Yes. I didn't know anything about that. He called me and said, we got this idea. What do you think? And what his idea was, as he always was so far ahead of the game, he said, I want to do like a big-time business seminar for band directors. But what we're going to do is we're going to concentrate on teaching them how to write a show, how to put a show together. So I think we did 8 that first year. We did a few in years to follow, but what happened was we learned that you saturate the market because the people that want that would come right away the first couple of years because they were afraid it wouldn't last. So he asked me to hire an assistant. So I got Freddie Martin to go with me and be my assistant.
Okay.
Now, talk about backup.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the good thing for me was that I wrote the book. I've still got that notebook somewhere with all the outline, all the stuff that we went through. But what Larry wanted and the way it worked out was we had all this coordinated. We either had a video to show an example or we had still pictures. Like everybody in the class got to see something all the time, not to mention a beautiful, notebook that we put together for them. And we did that for like a year and a half. And then I went on to that summer and Tim was like, okay, you're going to be the curriculum. And I said, what?
Just you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I ended up, that's when I realized that you have to put a leash on Tim. He'll let you do everything you want to do if you're not careful. So I ended up teaching just about the whole time I was there. And then the following year was when he said, we're going to do a lab band. And the first lab band was Marian Catholic.
Oh, it's Summer Nationals. That's right. That's right.
So we do this lab band that could have won the contest. And I go in and meet Greg Bim and I'm like, well, this is a band, and we didn't write a show anywhere near what they were capable of. And the reason is that we didn't know what the band was like. We had no idea. And we're trying to do this in 4 days. And we did it as a classroom. All the band directors would come watch us teach. And that.
Yeah.
But I did 35 years of summer symposium.
Wow.
I think the next longest run was I did at East Texas State. I did 18 straight years down there. And the first band director, by the way, Jim Keene was the band director at East Texas when I went in. And the guy that followed him was Gary Hill. And he went on to Arizona, but both those guys were fantastic. And by the way, my claim to fame as a drill writer is I taught Texas how to stand in a curved line. And I'm going to tell you, this is a true story.
Okay.
I go down there to teach that clinic. And the reason I do the clinic is I get a call on a Sunday afternoon, and this is in 1980, and I have 1 day off. This was after the week after that first camp I taught. I have 1 day off. My mother has prepared this wonderful home-cooked meal for me. We sit down to eat, and the phone rings, and I'll never forget my dad. They had a little yellow wall phone, and he reached over and answered the phone. He said, I think you need to speak to the other Mr. Buckner. So I get on the phone, and it's Jim Keene. And Jim says, Bob, I know you don't know me, but I need to ask you a favor. And I was like, well, I don't know if I can help you or not. What do you need? He said, well, George Zingali was supposed to teach my design class this week, and he has canceled. And I said, wow, when does it start? He said, well, tomorrow. And I said, well, so long story short, he said, you can catch a flight out of Asheville. You go to Atlanta and then you fly into Dallas and I'll pick you up. So I get to the airport. I mean, it's the last flight out of Asheville. I don't even remember going through Atlanta. I get to Dallas and sure enough, there's Jim Keene standing there. And we get in this big white van, 18 passenger van. And I said, how far is it to Commerce? And he pointed down in the floor between us and there was an 8-pack of beer. He said, when that beer's gone, we'll be in Commerce. And you know what? He opened the last beer right when we could see Whitley Hall, which is the big dorm down there.
Gosh, that's hilarious.
Now, it gets better because I go to bed and it's like 6 a.m. And I said, okay. He said, I'll be back and pick you up. I said, what time is the class start? He said, 8:30. So I teach the first day. I'm kind of zoning.
Yeah, I bet.
But what they did was there were some great band directors, Texas band directors in there, but they didn't know a thing about core style.
Yeah.
And this was kind of a breakthrough. And Jim Keene kind of made all this happen. And he said, you need to teach them everything you can teach them about how to write the drill. He said, they're not going to get anything if you don't teach them how to maneuver.
Yeah.
So I remember having them, just draw semicircles and put 12 people in it for their flags or 20 or whatever.
And then how to move it to the next spot, right?
Oh, yeah. And actually, we didn't even talk about flow like we did, how to space them out. I taught them how to use that divider. So beginning the next year, I remember judging the Texas State contest. I come out and the first thing I see is bands coming on the field Now, honestly, they weren't very progressive in their design, but they at least had their flags in a curved line. And I know where they learned that. So,
my friend, that makes you the father of modern marching drill.
that's probably true. Yeah.
That is awesome. How did you get transitioned over to Western Carolina?
Well, somewhere around 1988, I had a call from a friend who was the department chair at East Tennessee State University. And he called me and said, I need a band director for next year. Can you help me find one? Well, I made a few phone calls, but it was like a week before camp. And it's a college band, and you're not going to find a band director. So finally he said, will you come over and look at it? And I said, yes, but I'm not going to do it. And he said, well, just come look. So I went over and looked. And it just so happened that was the first year that we had a child in college. So Donna said, we could use that money. So usually and so I ended up taking the East Tennessee band. And I thought, well, I'm going to do 1 year over here. There were about 90 kids in the band, great kids. Had Mark Hoskins was one of the band, and Trey Harris.
Yeah.
I mean, some really, really good people in the band, but there weren't a lot of them. Well, by the time I left in 4 years, I think we had almost 190. But the fun part about it was I went over there and started realizing that I could do this, that I could teach college. I thought at first, I'm not really ready to teach college. I thought I didn't have enough degrees or something. And then I realized that practical experience teaches you a lot. So that happened until 1991. And in 1991, our son, Mike, our oldest son, died on July 4th. And of course, as a family, we're all devastated.
Of course.
And so I ended up saying, people don't know if prayers get answered or not. My answer is they do, but you better be paying attention. You don't know when the answer is going to come.
Yeah.
And I do remember that in August, John West, who was the director of bands at Western Carolina, called me and he said, we'd like for you to consider coming over and teaching the marching band at Western and teaching private tuba lessons. Well, I was already teaching private tuba at East Tennessee, and I did not want any part of that. It's a lot of preparation, for literature. And, being out of the business for a while, that's one place you lose literature. So anyway, he talked me into, I said, look, I'll do it, but how about I do the basketball pep band instead? Because I knew he didn't like to do it. And he's like, that'd be great. So for the fall of that year, I told the East Tennessee people I was under contract to them. And I couldn't get out of it until January. And so I said, I'm going to do both these bands. So I taught 2 university bands in 2 states at the same time.
What's the distance between those 2 cities?
I don't know. It was an hour and 52-minute drive.
That's not an easy drive, though. There's a lot of terrain between there.
Oh, no. At that time, there was no I-26. So it was like 2-lane road through Sam's Gap and all that place that got torn up by Helene, Irwin, Tennessee, all that.
Yeah.
That's what I went through every day. Absolutely beautiful country, beautiful people. Loved the school at East Tennessee. But for me, when I got to Western, what I realized was I thought it had more potential. And the reason I thought it had more potential was that at East Tennessee, the difference is at the end of rehearsals, those kids go home because they're all commuters. And great kids, but they all have jobs. So they can go to school, they can work, they can do all that stuff. So at Western, at the end of rehearsal, everybody hangs out. And, once you realize that, you've got a community and then you can make it happen. So,
well, you did amazing things there. One of the most fun college marching bands ever created there. But say the name of the town that they're in again?
Cullowhee.
Cullowhee. Now, I would like to share a little story since we laughed about Cullowhee earlier today. Bob brought the band to, I guess it was Grand Nationals, right?
Yes.
I tried really hard. For 35 years, I tried really hard to be very cognizant of how to say names, drum major names. I would always ask I would radio down to Dr. Tim and say, hey, can you have the drum major say their name, this, other? And for the life of me, I could not get Cullowhee out of my mouth correctly.
It's Cullowhee.
It was every time. It was just, and so Bob, apparently you'd had enough of that one day, or did you just preemptively set up that little note?
I think maybe Tim was behind that. I'm not sure.
I get this scrap. Literally, someone had taken a piece of paper and torn off the corner of it.
Yeah.
And wrote in phonetic spelling, we, or he. See, I just did it.
No, it's we, W-H-E.
I just did it. And so I took a picture of that. I think I posted it on social media. And to this day, every now and again, that picture surfaces and I can't help but think of you every single time. And it makes me laugh at just how funny that whole thing was. And I know that night when I said the name of the band, and I was probably reading it right off that little scrap of paper, you must have chuckled just a little bit at that point.
It was fun. And you did get it right. I do remember that. But,
well, finally, after how many years,
Well, the other part of Bands of America that most people probably don't even realize, but, after George Parks, after we lost George, we had taken our band at Western Carolina to the Rose Parade in 2011. And so right after the parade, Eric Martin comes over to me and said, I've got something I want to talk to you about. I said, okay, I'm interested in having you be the director of the National Honor Band. And we come back in 13. So I agreed to do it. And the rest was fantastic.
For those who don't know, the National Honor Band gets together every 4 years, right? And then they go do the Rose Parade. That's their big trip every year. So there's kids representation from all over.
Oh, yeah.
Really just, anyone who's listening to this podcast has undoubtedly seen that band on television. It's just an amazing experience for those kids. And how, are you still doing that?
No.
Because this is a year, right? This year is a Rose Parade year for the Honor Band.
Salcedo is doing it. Richard did it.
That's right.
And you know what? He does a fantastic job. And for me personally, the thing that was so cool about it was that, I get out there and I find out, that my staff is Michael Klesch and it's Tom Hannum. And I mean, I could go on and on with the people that do this. Matt Harloff.
You had a lot of heavy hitters on that staff, a lot.
It was a who's who. And basically, I do know that I remember one time that I actually conducted the band. And I realized that I didn't need to do that. I mean, it was so well done. The main thing I did do that I will take credit for, Dean Westman can basically attest to this, is I taught them how to get around that corner.
That Colorado, right, that first turn, right as you start the parade.
Well, it's about 110 degree angle.
Yeah.
It's not a 90 degree. So you can't square the corner, and it's not like you would normally do. And Greg Bem had figured out one of the years that he took the Marian Catholic band, he knew how to chart that corner. Of course, that's Greg.
Yeah.
He charted it. He sent me all the directions. And so when we got ready to take the Western band, we painted that on our practice field. So we painted every rank had a line that they could follow all the way around the corner. And we had it marked off for every 8 steps. And of course, the kids on the inside take a shorter step and the ones on the outside slightly longer. But we did the same thing for the National Honor Band. And I taught them, I said, now, chances are you're going to get in the middle of this corner and you're going to have to stop. So I taught them how to stop and start out of that corner.
Oh, wow.
And sure enough, we got stopped during the parade. And I remember Dean comes on the radio and said, Bob Buckner, thank you. That was quite a moment for me.
Because if anyone who's done a parade understands that they don't just flow at an even rate. They stop and they start based on, TV coverage or a float or a horse that needs its manure picked up out of the street or, something like that. So that's really something that no one had even considered prior to that. Oh my God, that's cool.
The other thing they do, they don't tell you everything about the Rose Parade. And one of the things is that when you get to right where you turn and go down Colorado, and that's downhill.
It is.
And they don't really tell you that, but it's not steep downhill, but it's downhill. So the morning of the parade, we're at the breakfast for the directors. They have this guy in the corner and they said, now, if this guy stands up and waves this sign, you need to have your band run over to one side. That was the sign for a runaway float.
Oh my goodness. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. What they didn't tell you was that, those floats weigh several tons.
Oh, sure.
And if one of them lost their brakes, that's how they did it.
This is the emergency children get out of the way sign.
Yes. I don't know where we would go, but.
Okay, here's what that says to me, that had happened before. And they didn't have an emergency sign to tell the children to get out of the way.
Yeah,
wow.
Probably right. But it was an amazing experience. Both times I've done that. And one year we did Julie Duty's group. They actually participated with us in it. And, we've had handicapped students who've made it. One little girl, a blind flute player, marched the whole thing.
Nice.
And I still stay in touch with her on Facebook. I mean, it's amazing how many of those kids, they still relate to that.
Bob, let me ask you something. So, Of all these years, I mean, since the early 70s to today, to this conversation, Bands of America, Music for All, Marching Bands of America has been a pretty prevalent part of what you've got going on. Think of the people you've met and the relationships that have been created over those years. That's got to mean everything to you.
That organization changed my life, and it changed it in a totally positive way in that I learned so much. First thing I learned was that excellence is rewarded. And the second thing I learned was that they don't care where you're from. They just want you to be yourself and be true to yourself. And when I go down the list of people that I've met over the years, 8 out of 10 seem to be people that came from there.
Yeah. I've always said, and I can hear it in your voice as you're talking, the man I am today is a direct result of my involvement in music and music education, my time in the Madison Scouts, and of course, 35 years with Bands of America and associated with that. And the infectious nature of that quest for excellence, it pervades everything they do. And I love that the family that's been created as a result of that is just continuing to grow and grow and grow. Where do you see this organization heading off into the future? I mean, you were basically there at the beginning and throughout all of this time, you've got to have some ideas as to what you'd like to see. And I'm not asking you to, give your input, but just where do you see the group heading the organization heading in the next 50 years?
I would like for them to concentrate on two things. One of them is I think we need to broaden the scope in terms of get orchestras and possibly even choirs involved so that you get these large groups of people. The group dynamic is so powerful, and it's just as powerful in a good orchestra as it is a good band. The difference is it's just not as physical. But the other thing I'd like to see them do is I would like to see them find a way to avoid just rewarding the elite bands. They have been so good at recognizing who the very best bands are, and it's not that the system was designed to do that. I think in a way it was, but I think also they kind of forgot. I'm not sure a Silva could go there anymore and feel fulfilled. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you remember back when like Jackson Academy made finals for the first time, things like that. I mean, there are always going to be those Cinderella moments that happen, but I can see exactly what you mean. I hope that the experience that every kid has is unique and special and inspiring, right? That's the goal. And I love that the focus isn't on placement as much as it is on experience.
I would agree with that. And I think that's a hard one to do because we've been talking about that for 25 or 30 years.
Yeah, for sure.
I served on all kinds of boards. I was not on a board of directors. I wasn't that fancy to get those, but I've served on like the judging commission.
Yeah.
And I just know how serious those guys were. You sit in the room and there's Al Castronova and Terry Friends and all these guys and LJ. And those guys, I mean, they really put a lot of thought and effort into it, and how to evaluate judges and how to train judges and how to choose judges.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that the NFL and the NCAA go through the same thing because that is a part of it.
Yeah.
But one of the things we don't do is we don't find a way, that maybe that band of 100 can go somewhere and their excellence can be rewarded on the same level. And I often thought maybe they ought to do places where they did dual events at the same time.
Oh, interesting.
If you've got a city with a great big stadium, if you've got a dome stadium and then 10 blocks away, you've got a high school stadium that's really good, maybe have a cutoff, maybe have a contest that has, if your band is over 100 pieces, you can't, you have to go to the other contest, that kind of thing.
That's interesting.
I don't know what the specifics would be. That's kind of generalizing, but
yeah, those are out of my pay grade for sure.
Yeah.
So Bob Buckner, there wouldn't be a Bands of America without you. Every story that's told involves you. You clearly, from that first day when you decided to learn how to write drill on your own, the impact of your legacy on the activity is immeasurable. And I want to thank you very much for taking time out of your day to talk with me about this. 50 years is a lot to cover, but it wouldn't be complete without a conversation with you. So I thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts and share a lot of really good memories. What it makes me do is I kind of tingle a little bit thinking about all those kids that came through that Silva program and the Western Carolina program that learned the joy of just entertaining people and being excellent at what they do. So thank you.
Hopefully they'll all hear this and reach out.
We'll see.
Thank you, Bob.
All right. Take care.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Joining Us podcast. We are celebrating 50 years of Music for All and Bands of America. Do you have your own story or memory to share? Well, I want to hear it. You can record your own story by visiting musicforall.org/podcasts. We may just include your voice in a future episode. Hey, thanks to Yamaha, our national presenting sponsor, and don't forget to make sure you're subscribed to the Music for All Podcast Network, wherever you get your podcasts. I want to thank Ben and Laura from the team at Music for All for making this happen and lining up all of our guests. And of course, the way it sounds, that's the magic of our executive producer, Patrick Keller. I'm Chuck Henson. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week on Joining Us. Joining us from Avon, Indiana.